Welcome to the New Books Network.
I'm Caleb Zakarin, editor of the New Books Network. Today I'm speaking with Sonu Shamdasani, general editor of the forthcoming critical editions of the works of Carl Gustav Jung. Volume 1 of a planned 26-part series is due to come out in 2026. So we thought to kick off this collection, we should speak with the person guiding this enormous project. Sonu is a professor at University College London, co-director at the Health Humanities Center, and recognized as one of the world's most renowned scholars of psychologist Carl Jung. A thinker and writer as prolific as Jung deserves the treatment that Princeton University Press is giving him. I'm thrilled to get the chance today to speak with Sonu about what goes into a 20-year project like this, new 26-volume critical edition. Sonu, thanks for joining me today on the New Books Network.
Thanks. Good to speak to you.
It's great to speak with you as well. This project is truly enormous in scope and in scale. I think it's the largest academic project that I've ever interviewed someone about. So obviously, we want people to have the standard book talk interview because it really is just it would require hours and hours and hours to really get into what's covered here. But before talking about this project, I was wondering if you just introduce yourself and talk about how you first became involved in the work of Carl Jung.
I first encountered Jung's works in my teens, and that was my introduction to psychology. So my initial interests were towards psychology and philosophy, and I was interested in the field of psychotherapy in particular. And as I was beginning to study these fields, fields looked to be sort of a chaos of conflicting opinions. And I wanted to understand how those fields had got into the state that they were in. And that led to increasing historical interests, and the field of history of psychology and psychiatry is what I've been in ever since.
So yeah, this in many ways, this project is historical in nature. I was wondering if you talk a little about how you got involved in this particular project and what your work has been like as the general editor.
Over 20 years ago, I co-founded the Philemon Foundation, which had the expressed aim of publishing Jung's unpublished works. And at the outset, it was thought that once the foundation had completed publishing the hitherto unpublished works, it would tackle a new translation and proper edition of the existing works. There's a lot left to be desired on that front. And I'd mentioned this, let's say, many years ago to my editor at Princeton, Fred Appel. And he remembered this conversation when Brigitte van Reinberg, who had run the history lists and then was the appointed head of global development at Princeton, was looking over their backlists in terms of looking at what large projects they could develop from that, and asked me if I was still interested. Of course.
For someone with very limited familiarity of Jung, I feel like Jung is one of those writers, one of those thinkers like, Friedrich Nietzsche or Sigmund Freud, who, many people have maybe read a little bit of them, but they've only got like the faintest gloss of who they are fully as a thinker. Could you introduce Jung and why you think that this project is so important?
Well, in a way, I think you've answered it, in the sense that when people think today about psychology, figures that often or most frequently come to mind are figures such as Freud and Jung. They're not the figures that are currently taught in the psychology departments in the main. Why so? Because they tackled the big questions. So regardless of whether they got these questions right, regardless of whether one agrees with what they said, they were dealing with questions of life, death, sexuality, spirituality, meaning. What is it all about? So they were tackling the big questions, and that's what makes them still interesting today.
For this particular project, you're listed as the general editor. I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit of what that actually means as far as how you're approaching this work. What you're actually imprinting on in terms of the work that you're doing for this project.
The first task was to develop a plan for the project. and I proposed that this be produced in a chronological way, which actually happened to be Jung's own suggestion for how his work should have been done in the first place, with a detailed scholarly apparatus and in a new translation. The task then was to develop a team of editors, translators, and drew up a map of how that would work. So that was my first task, and in a way to set the systems in place. And there are a couple of other editors, my colleagues, Martin Liebscher, Guy Domenici, and Christopher Wagner. And I myself am still editing one of the concurrent streams of projects. There's a translator, Caitlin Stevens, and a translation proofer, Astrid Freuler, and a research assistant, Jenny Clark. And that's the core team.
So obviously that, this project is going to come out over the next 19 or 20 or so years. Are you still figuring out exactly what, volume 13, 14, 16 plus are going to look like? Or do you really have a clear picture in mind of like what everything's going to be once it comes out?
We have what I call a jigsaw puzzle. And so it's about a 600-piece jigsaw puzzle. And so, yes, we have it all mapped at this stage. But as we found in editing literally the first 3 volumes, new items have come to light in the course of our research, which is exciting. So we expect that to expand as we go on.
What do you see as the current state of studies of the works of Carl Jung, and what do you hope that this project will help to either change about certain discussions or illuminate for readers of Jung's work?
Any field of study is dependent on its primary texts. That's its constraints. In a way, it can only advance so far as the quality of its primary texts allow. The problem that's beset Jung studies is you have a corpus that is simply inadequate for proper scholarly work. It's incomplete. The texts have not been well produced at a philological level, and the translation leaves a lot to be desired. So the first task is just establishing a reliable textual corpus. You see it in other fields. You see with Nietzsche studies, it only really gets on a firm footing when there's a decent edition has been put together.
You have a general pitch for someone who hasn't read any Jung that might be interested in learning more about his work?
Oh, you ever felt lost in your life?
Once or twice.
I wish I'd only felt lost in life once or twice. That sounds great. And wondered how to figure out how to find your way forward. Well, that's the question that Jung addresses. And his suggestion is that individuals have those resources within themselves, within their own imagination and creative faculties. And what he attempts to sort of map out in psychotherapy and one's own sort of work on oneself is a way to access those resources.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm wondering, obviously this is a 26-volume set. That's just an enormous amount of writing. How is Jung so prolific?
If you kind of put together the amount of emails that people generate, it would probably amount to something similar. I think it's about focus and organization.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, there's a lot of writing that gets done in contemporary times that just, we don't necessarily think of as the, obviously like letters get accumulated. We treat letters with such reverence from writers of the past, but we don't necessarily think of that email in that same capacity, though maybe that will be a a project for people to think about in the future with contemporary scholars. Uh, for you, is there a particular, obviously that this first volume is coming out, so it's going to be a little while before someone might be able to read some of the selections that you might recommend in the critical editions, but are there any works of Jung that you would recommend to people as maybe both great, your favorite introductory works by him, or maybe just kind of deep cuts that people don't normally think about when they think about Jung, that you would recommend that people read that they might not have read before?
I'd recommend that they just plunge into Jung's Red Book, Liber Novus, and follow that up with his 1925 seminar, which is published under the title Introduction to Jungian Psychology, where he gives an overview of his own development.
In the course of this project, did you have any shifts of opinion either about Jung's work or even about Jung as a person?
The volume I'm editing currently, which is volume 2, which is his first beginnings as a psychiatrist. And at this point, the case files of the Burghausen clinic where he worked have just come on access for those years. And so it's an unparalleled sort of situation where you begin to see the raw material, the people that he was dealing with. This was what he was confronted with. So far, we found about 150 records so far of those first couple of years, which he wrote. And you see an intense fascination with people's lives, an empathic entrance, an empathic intention. Sorry, I'll start again. You see an intense empathic interest in people's lives with what led them to the disorders and the sufferings that they've landed up in. And to try to fathom out really what makes people tick, what makes them lose their way, and what techniques could he use to help them. So you begin to see literally the raw material in which he began to sort of formulate the material that was posing questions to him, that he was trying to formulate answers to. And I find that's really quite a moving portrait. You just see people that are really in a bad way, to put it mildly.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I'm sure as you continue to go through more of it, and as you already have in your career, you'll just discover more, and we'll be able to say more with greater depth. Sonu, it's been really wonderful to speak with you about this new critical edition. I definitely think anyone who's interested in this at all, it's something to follow over the next 20 years as new volumes come out. So there definitely will be a lot of reading for anyone who's interested in going along the journey with you. So thank you so much for being asked on the New Books Network. It was really wonderful to speak with you.
Good to speak to you too, and I look forward to speaking to you hopefully over the next 20 years as the volumes start appearing.
Absolutely, yeah. We need to make this a regular yearly occurrence, and I'm sure we will. So it was really wonderful to speak.